you ever looked at, a giant skyscraper or a famous painting and just thought, man, I wish I could own even a tiny piece of that? Well, there's this incredible technology that's making that exact thing possible, and it's poised to completely change how we think about ownership. It's called tokenization.
I mean, really think about that for a second. Owning a fraction of a landmark building or a sliver of priceless art, all with just a few taps on your phone. It sounds like something out of a sci-fi movie, right? But it's the very real promise of tokenization, and we're going to break down exactly how it all works.
So, before we jump into the solution, we first have to understand the problem it's trying to solve. Forever, the world's most valuable assets, we're talking prime real estate, rare art, you name it, they've all been locked away in this exclusive playground, pretty much only accessible to the super rich.
And look, the barrier isn't just the mind-boggling price tag. These kinds of assets, whether it's real estate or fine art, they have some core issues that have kept them out of reach for pretty much everybody else.
Let's just quickly break down these walls. First off, these assets are what we call illiquid. You can't just sell a building in an afternoon, right? Second, they're indivisible. You can't exactly sell the 37th floor of an office tower on its own. And finally, the big one. They require a staggering amount of money to buy in the first place. For most of us, these three barriers have been totally insurmountable. Well, until now. So how in the world does tokenization just smash through those walls? Well, the core idea behind it is actually something you're probably already super familiar with. Think about how the stock market works. It's totally normal for us that a massive company can be chopped up into millions of tiny little pieces of ownership, and we call those shares. Tokenization does the exact same thing, but for physical objects. So instead of shares of a company, you have digital tokens that represent ownership of a real asset. It's really that simple of a concept. So let's get a formal definition here. What is tokenization? It's the process of taking the ownership rights of a real-world asset, a building, a painting, you name it, and converting them into digital tokens that live on a blockchain. Each one of those tokens is basically a secure, verifiable slice of ownership. And this is where it gets really, really powerful. Let's take a commercial property worth 5 crore rupees. That's 50 million rupees, an amount that's just completely out of reach for most people. Through tokenization, that property can be divided into 5 million digital tokens, with each one worth only 10 rupees. All of a sudden, that massive barrier to entry isn't just lowered, it's absolutely shattered. Now, of course, for any of this to work, you need technology that's both secure and trustworthy. I mean, this is ownership we're talking about. And that's exactly where blockchain comes into the picture. So let's take a look at how this whole process actually happens. Okay, so how does an actual building turn into a bunch of digital tokens? It's basically a 5-step process. First up, the asset gets put into a special legal wrapper called a special purpose vehicle, or SPV. Then it's professionally valued to see what it's worth. Next comes the tech magic. Something called a smart contract creates or mints the digital tokens on a blockchain. Fourth, those tokens get listed on a marketplace where people can buy and sell them. And finally, every single one of those transactions is recorded on the blockchain, creating this transparent, unchangeable record of who owns what. Now, I just mentioned that term, smart contract, and it's really important. The best way to think about it is like a digital vending machine for ownership. It's just a piece of code that automatically follows the rules of an agreement. It handles all the transactions and enforces the rules without needing a human in the middle. This is what makes the whole system so incredibly efficient and secure. All right, so we know what it is and how it works. Let's talk about the why. Why is this such a monumental deal? This isn't just some new way to invest. It's a fundamental upgrade to the entire concept of ownership itself. The benefits here are just absolute game changers. All of a sudden, you have liquidity. A building that might have taken months to sell can now be traded in minutes. You get true democratization. These high-value assets are no longer just for the 1%. You get real fractional ownership. You can buy exactly the amount you can afford, no more, no less. And the whole thing is built on a foundation of transparency and efficiency, which slashes the need for middlemen and seriously cuts down on fraud. But, like any new technology that's this disruptive, it's not a perfectly smooth ride. There are some pretty big challenges that we still need to figure out on this new frontier. Yeah, it's important to be realistic about the hurdles. The biggest one is definitely regulatory uncertainty. Governments around the world are still scrambling to figure out what the rules should be. Then there's the real world to think about. Who's actually maintaining the physical building or artwork? And finally, there's a technological risk. That smart contract code has to be absolutely perfect because one tiny bug could put everyone's ownership at risk.
But even with those challenges, the main takeaway here is crystal clear. Tokenization is an incredibly powerful force, and it's going to start blurring the lines between the physical things we can see and touch and the digital economies we live in every single day. The technology is here, and its potential is just undeniable. It's really no longer a question of if you'll be able to own a tiny piece of a famous landmark. The only real question left is when.